Hey, what's up, nerds? Welcome back to Guys That Magic. I'm Shane, and I'm joined by Dave. Say what up, dude.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
We are doing the $100 upgrade for the Squirreled Away Precon that just came out in Bloomborough. This video will be focusing on the face commander, but if you'd like to see the backup commander of that deck, go over on our Patreon, check it out. But like I said, this is the face, so let's just get right into it, Dave. Who are you playing with, and what is the strategy?
So the face commander of Squirreled Away is Hazel of the Rootbloom. She is two, a black and a green for a total of 4 mana. She's a legendary creature, Squirrel Druid, and she has 2 abilities. The first of which says you can tap her, pay 2 life, and you also tap X untapped tokens you control to add X mana in any combination of colors. The second ability says, at the beginning of your end step, you create a token that is a copy of target token you control. If that token is a squirrel instead, you may create 2 tokens that are copies of it. And of course, she's a 3/5.
So you're making tons of squirrels, it sounds like.
We are maybe going to make some squirrels in this deck.
Awesome. Well, either way, you're going to make a lot of mana then, I guess. We'll see.
We're maybe going to do that too.
Well, let's just get right into it. Talk to me about some of the additions.
Yeah, so as far as additions go, there's not actually a whole lot of scrolls in Magic. So I took some inspiration from Bloomborough itself, went in and dug around in that set, and I kind of fell in love with this first card. That is Camellia, the Seed Miser. She is 1, a black and a green for 3 mana. You get a legendary creature, Squirrel Warlock. She's a 3/3 and has Menace, and says other squirrels you control have Menace. She also says whenever you sacrifice 1 or more foods, create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. And she has another ability in which you can pay 2 mana, forage, and that means that you put a +1/+1 counter on each other squirrel you control, and to forage, you exile 3 cards from your graveyard, or you sacrifice a food.
Yep, I can see why you put that in the deck. Having
I
all your
mean,
squirrels have menace, dude? Hello?
yeah, it kind of checks all the boxes. It obviously, like, this works out is just kind of like caring about squirrels. It's not really like a squirrel lord, but it does give an ability to all of them. It has the ability to pump all of them up with those +1/+1 counters, and also making squirrel tokens as well. So like this does a lot for us.
I definitely like this. I feel like they should have put this in the deck originally, but I understand they probably want you to buy the new set too.
Yeah, they do tend to do that. Moving on, as I just mentioned, there's not really a whole lot of squirrels, and I do feel like this deck is really interesting, um, because our commander actually doesn't care about squirrels at all. She cares about squirrel tokens. But as far as like cards with that actual creature type, she doesn't do anything with them. So we are going to be deviating a little bit. We're just going to be trying to bump up the power level here. We're going to be working around with other cards that also care about tokens, and there is a quite a bit of cards in this list that also care about like an aristocrat strategy, so having our creatures die. So that's really where the like next group of creatures are going to come in. This first one here is Marionette Apprentice. It is 1 and a black for a creature, Human Artificer. It is a 1/2, and it has Fabricate 1. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you can either put a +1/+1 counter on it, or you can create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. You're always going to choose the option on these cards that give you the token. So if they do 1 or more things, just go with the token route here, and you're going to do the servo. She also says, though, whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is going to put a little bit of pressure on our opponents. It's going to allow us to just kind of like drain them out. There's already like Blood Artist style effects in this deck, so this is just going to add to that package.
Yeah. All your squirrels dying and then draining me is kind of scary. And dude, the fact that it says each opponent, that's where I love those kind of words. Sometimes it's like target opponent, which completely sucks, but yeah, this card's nuts.
Yeah. Well, I guess you might like the next one a little bit more because this next one is a target opponent, but it's going to hit a little bit harder. This next one is Marionette Master. It is 4 and 2 black for a total of 6 mana. You get a creature, Human Artificer. It is a 1/3, and this one has Fabricate 3. So it either comes in with 3 +1/+1 counters, or it comes in and it makes 3 servos. It says whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. Now, this one specifically only cares about artifacts, so you're primarily going to be triggering this off of either the servos that you could potentially be making off this, or other things like food tokens, clue tokens, blood tokens, any of the other artifact tokens that this deck makes. This one, if you do put the +1/+1 counters on it, she will hurt harder, but she's going to be targeting an opponent, so just kind of keep that one in mind.
Yeah, man. You got the master and the apprentice. Love it. I see we got some more ways to make tokens. Talk to me about these.
Yeah, so we have two more creatures in this list that are dedicated to token production itself. The first of which is Ophiomancer. This is 2 and a black. It's a creature human shaman. It is a 2/2 and says at the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, you create a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch. Now, the little caveat here being is that if you have a snake already in play, this isn't going to trigger and it's not going to make you any tokens. But those snakes having Death Touch is really impactful in this list. That's going to create a blocker that's going to be pretty nasty for your opponents. And with your commander in play, on your end step, she can make another one of them. So she kind of acts as just like an additional engine to generate more death touching snakes if this card does manage to just like sit around and your commander does her thing.
And no one wants to attack into anything with Death Touch. Even a 1/1, like, you're going to trade up every time.
I mean, that is the game plan here, or at least kind of like get the heat off this deck for a little bit. It does do a fairly decent job whenever it comes to token production, but I mean, most of our tokens are going to be kind of small, a lot of 1/1s. So having those 1/1s with Death Touch is a huge plus.
Love it.
And then the last creature that makes tokens, we're going to throw in Peregrine Took in here. It is 2 and a green for a total of 3 mana. He's a legendary creature, Halfling Citizen. He's a 2/3 and says if one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional food token are created instead. You can sacrifice 3 foods to draw a card.
You're going to have so many tokens in this deck. I'm just seeing the future. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the game plan here is we are trying to maximize our overall output whenever it comes to token production. So just trying to make sure that we can go wide, maintain some crazy board states, hopefully create that nice little presence of just like, don't hit me, or if you do, you're going to be penalized for it.
Well, I saw some token generators. This looks like we're going to start getting hurt for something. Talk to me about these.
Yeah, so the next 2 cards, I'm trying to capitalize off of having our things die, which is kind of rewarding in this deck. The first card that I have in here is Mirkwood Bats. This one is 3 and a black. It's 4 mana for a 2/3 with flying. And it also says whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is a huge drain effect because anytime we create those tokens or if we have, sacrifice them off for some value, our opponents are going to end up getting hurt.
Yeah, it's got the each opponent text, and it's enter and leaving. Like this is dumb. We've seen this card a lot, and it's fantastic in Aristocrats.
It is definitely fantastic in Aristocrats. I'm a little disappointed that it says sacrifices and not just like dies. And then the next card in this Punish You package is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. She is 1 and 2 black for 3 mana. She's a legendary creature nightmare, and she's a 3/3. She says at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it, and for each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life, and you draw a card. So,
I like that.
Yeah, this makes use of our tokens. We're probably not killing off our opponent's things with this card. But the big thing here is this deck is desperate for card draw. Straight out of the box, the Precon has a pretty glaring problem with card draw, actually. There's not very many good ways to get extra cards in your hand. So Braids does a pretty good job of that while also allowing us to trigger many of our death triggers or like care about our creatures dying triggers.
All right, Braids is terrifying, dude. I've seen that card do tons of work. Highlighted by you, actually. But these next group of creatures are pretty scary too. Talk to me about them.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was looking at with Hazel was how can we kind of like maximize the copy token effect. I was looking around online for like, okay, well, what kind of like big tokens can we copy? The obvious one being like Desolation Twin, but that's 10 mana, and although we can potentially get there, it's still kind of clunky. I kind of figured, or I kind of found out relatively quickly, there's not a ton of like super scary tokens for us to copy. So instead of copying like super scary big tokens, I figured let's try to go wide instead. So this next card, this is Scoot Swarm. It is 2 and a green for a creature insect. It's a 1/1 with landfall and says whenever a land enters battlefield under your control, you create a 1/1 green insect creature token. That's cute, but we don't care about that part. It also says if you control 6 or more lands, create a token that is a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. That's the part we care about because our commander can make copies of Scoot Swarm as long as we have 1 token of them around.
Yep. And Scoot Swarm never gets out of hand, right?
Oh, it gets out of hand immediately. That's exactly what we want with this.
I know.
Turns out the squirrel deck we're killing you with insects.
Insects, squirrels, what? The same thing in my opinion.
And then kind of like a duplication effect whenever it comes to like what our commander is trying to do. I am going to be putting in a Seeker's Chariot. This is 3 and a green for a legendary artifact vehicle. It's a 4/4. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, you create 2/2 green cat creature tokens. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. It also says whenever it attacks, you create a token that is a copy of target token you control. So this kind of has like that duplication of effect. It does the same thing to an extent as what our commander does, but it also does come in with those 2/2 tokens. So we can start to copy those as well and maybe make ourselves like a little cat army if we want.
Okay, cats, squirrels, insects. I think you're kind of just dipping in everything, and I love it. Seeker's Chariot's a great addition too.
To be completely honest, that's kind of what the Precon was straight out of the box. I mean, yeah, obviously, like it does have some ways to make squirrel tokens, but like a lot of the creatures that it makes are not squirrels. I mean, we even make humans, which I found really weird in a Bloomburrow deck.
Well, it's all good. You're gonna be making a ton of mana with them, I guess. Well, it looks like we have a way to win the game now. What is this card?
Yeah, we do like winning. We're a go wide deck. I like cards that have the ability to close out the game, and hopefully we don't have to tap down a bunch of our creature tokens to be able to get this in play, because we're going to want them. This is Craterhoof Behemoth. It is 5 and 3 green. It's a total of 8 mana. It's a creature beast. It's a 5/5 with haste, and says whenever it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So if we got 5 creatures, our creatures will get +5/+5. Generally speaking, in a go wide token strategy, you could probably pretty easily have more than 5 tokens. This just could mean game over for our opponents.
Yeah, this is a fantastic finisher in any go wide strategy, like you said. But you were just talking about 5. I'm pretty sure you'll have no problem getting this to like 10 plus. I'm terrified of this card, especially in your deck. That looks like your last creature of the deck. Talk to me about some more spells.
Yeah, the first and actually only instant that we're going to throw in here, we're playing Golgari. We might as well play with Premier Golgari removal. Also, this card is like dirt cheap right now, so pick up a million copies of it. It's Assassin's Trophy. It is a black and a green for an instant. It says destroy target permanent and opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, and then shuffle. They are going to get a land out of it, but you get something gone, which is probably going to be much more impactful. But Assassin's Trophy right now, thank you, Assassin's Creed. This card is like 60 cents.
Wow. I mean, and this card is really cool too, because best case scenario, you're playing against somebody that's super greedy and has like 1 or 2 basics. Maybe they already played them. They don't get anything.
True. I mean, the Family Matters deck, I've heard, has no islands in it.
There you go. And what about some enchantments? You gotta add any of those?
I did add 2 enchantments. I'm not going to lie, we have quite a bit of money for us to work with for this $100 upgrade. Many of the creatures that we care about are a little bit on the cheaper end, and I figured, you know what? This deck likes whenever things die, and it already has a fairly decent number of board wipes. So let's kind of continue the theme. We're going to be throwing in the Meat Hook Massacre. This is X and 2 black for a legendary enchantment. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain 1 life.
I love the Meat Hook Massacre. It was fantastic in Standard. It is still super fantastic in EDH.
Yeah, just wish that it had Flash so that, you know, we could quickly get things -4/-4 up against like a Raccoon deck.
Yeah. If only.
If only.
Shit, this does not need Flash.
To help us out with our Don't Touch Me game, we also are going to be throwing in a Dictate of Erebos. This is 3 and 2 black for an enchantment with Flash. And this one says, whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So we have Surprise. Our little chump blockers become very scary.
There's the Flash you wanted. There it is. You got it there.
Yep.
Really good card still. All right, I love both those. Did we do anything to the lands?
I did. This is a Golgari deck with it only being 2 colors. Realistically speaking, the Precon mana base, it's not great, but it's not bad. Like it's not going to hurt you and punish you for the most part. But there are 3 cards that I did want to throw in here. The first of which is Undergrowth Stadium. This is a land that says it enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. You can tap it for a black or a green. And if you've been watching my videos for any amount of time, I am addicted to these next two cards. I can't have a deck without them. The first of which is Scavenger Grounds. This is a land that is a desert. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can pay 2, tap it, sacrifice it, and exile all graveyards. We do have a little bit of like graveyard play in this deck, so this does have the potential to hurt us. But I mean, we're not a dedicated graveyard deck, and if somebody is trying to like, I don't know, play Buried Alive or reanimation strategies, like real reanimation strategies, Scavenger Grounds is a must-have. I've also got War Room in here, same kind of thing. I can't play a deck without this card. It's a fantastic card draw engine. You can tap it for a colorless, or whenever you're bored and you have nothing to do, you can pay 3 mana, tap it, pay life equal to the number of your colors in your commander's color identity to draw a card.
All fantastic lands. And yeah, that Scavenger Grounds gets very annoying. I can tell by experience. I hate getting Scavenger Ground by you.
It's one of my favorite lands. You play it on turn 1 whenever you don't have a turn 1 drop, and then all of a sudden the graveyard deck has to sequence things so awkwardly.
Yeah. Very aware. I know. And is that going to do it for your additions?
That is going to do it for the additions for Hazel.
Awesome. Well, you added a bunch of really cool cards. Time to start taking out some other cards that maybe aren't so cool. Make room for them. Let's just get into them. What are the cards you're cutting to make room?
Yeah, so this Precon it's really interesting. We care about tokens. We kind of care about squirrels. There are so many creatures that don't do either. And I'm just a little confused as to why this Precon was so gummed up with them. The first card I'm going to be removing here, this is Haywire Might. It's a single mana for an artifact, creature, insect. It's a 1/1 and says whenever it dies, you gain 2 life. You can also pay a green and sacrifice it to exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. This seems like an awkward hate piece, and like aside from the fact that we have some aristocrats themes, like I'm not entirely sure why this card was even included.
Yeah. I think I'm going to say the same thing for a lot of these, but it's a Precon, so we got to cut out the not so powerful and add the powerful.
Yeah. The next card, this is actually one of our token producers. It's one of the few that actually also makes squirrels. So leave your hate down below, but I'm not a fan of this card. This is Nested Shambler. It's a single black mana for a creature zombie. It is a 1/1 and says whenever it dies, you create X tapped 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens, where X is this thing's power. This deck really doesn't have an ability to pump this creature's power, at least not reliably. So you get a 1/1 zombie that you don't care about, that whenever it finally does die, you get a 1/1 squirrel that you might kind of care about.
Unfortunate.
Up next, we have a Skyfisher Spider. This is 2, a black, and a green. It is a creature spider. It's a 3/3 with reach, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. Whenever you do, destroy target non-land permanent. It also says whenever it dies, you may gain 1 life for each creature card in your graveyard, and if you do, you exile Skyfisher Spider from your graveyard. So kind of a weird little piece there. I don't really care about life gain. It is neat that this does have removal on it, though. But this deck is kind of loaded with removal. It's actually, I would say that that's kind of what this deck excels at most.
Plus, you added the Assassin's Trophy, so it's more efficient.
I am removing 2 more creatures. The first of which I feel like we just kind of did a straight upgrade on. This is Endray's Forerunners. It is 5 and 3 green. So for 8 mana, you get a creature Boar. It's a 7/7. It's got Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, each other creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. Craterhoof Behemoth is really just like this card, but just so much better because it gives your creatures just a massive power and toughness increase, whereas this one just gives kind of a minuscule one at +2/+2. It's still a cool card. I'm glad that they included it here, but Craterhoof Behemoth does everything that I want this to do and more.
Very true. This is Craterhoof at home.
And then this next card. We have Beledros Witherbloom here. This is 5, a black, and a green for 7 mana. You get a legendary creature, Elder Dragon. It's a 4/4 with flying, and it says at the beginning of each upkeep, you create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with, whenever this creature dies, you gain 1 life. It also has an ability in which you can pay 10 life to untap all lands you control, activate only once each turn. I don't really understand this inclusion. My thought process is that like this deck is very weak to flying, and one of the precons has a lot. So it's cool for 7 mana. You get a 4/4 that can block a couple of times. You are gonna gum up the board with those pests, but even at that, like it's not amazing token production. You get one on the beginning of each end step, so it's 4 per turn cycle, assuming everybody's still alive. But like, I don't know. I just feel like this card is really clunky and incredibly expensive.
Yeah, it does seem a little slow. I can see why you cut it. Those are all the creatures you're cutting. How about some non-creature spells?
This first one here is Chatterstorm. It is 1 and a green for a sorcery. It says create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token, and this card has Storm. This is a cool card. It is a great token production card. Paying 2 mana to get a 1/1 kind of sucks. But that's not what this card is intended to do. This card is intended to be the 4th or 5th spell that you cast over the course of a game. The mana curve of this deck doesn't allow you to do that. This is kind of a very expensive deck as far as like average mana value goes. I mean, I just talked about 2 cards that I removed that were an 8-drop and a 7-drop. Like Chatterstorm makes a 1/1 the vast majority of the time in this deck.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to storm off with him. I can see it.
And and like I feel like that's honestly kind of one of the difficulties about this deck is like this is one of the best token production cards we have for squirrels, and I'm cutting it because it's not good. And I think that just kind of speaks volume to the quality of cards we're working with that make squirrels. The next card I'm going to be cutting, this is one of the brand new ones. This is Cash Grab. This is 1 and a green for an instant. It says mill 4 cards. You may put a permanent card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you control a squirrel or returned a squirrel card to your hand this way, you create a food token. I know why that this is in the deck. Like this, it cantrips, it replaces itself. It gives you like a little bit of recursion, which is cute. And it also makes a food token. You can actually kind of whiff on this. Like there's I don't know. There's times where I was playing around with this deck and I just felt like this didn't really do anything.
Yeah, I understand that. You definitely don't want to cast speed on a squirrel because, I mean, I guess you could just get the recursion, but getting the food seems a little better.
Up next, I'm going to be removing, well, some of our removal package is going to go. Like I mentioned earlier on, this deck has a lot of removal. It definitely feels like this was one of the big themes of this deck. The first card here is Tear Asunder. It is 1 and a green for an instant. It's got Kicker, where you can pay an additional 1 and a black. And it says exile target artifact or enchantment. If this spell was kicked, exile target non-land permanent instead. It's cool. I don't have a problem with this card. I just felt that Assassin's Trophy was just better, and I would rather play that.
It is. You're not wrong.
Casualties of War is also going to be getting the cut here. This is 2 black and 2 green for 6 mana. You get a sorcery that says choose 1 or more. Destroy target artifact, destroy target creature, destroy target enchantment, destroy target land, and destroy target planeswalker. Ideally, this is 6 mana to do all of that. But not always. And if you only have like 1 or 2 targets, 6 mana is a lot. This is kind of one of those weird cards where it really wants to be a board wipe, but it's not. And having a 6 mana investment try to occupy the spot of like maybe single target or maybe like 2 target removal, it just comes in very clunky.
Yeah, I can see that, man. It's kind of it's not really removing all of anything. It's just 1 of each. Yeah, I get it.
The last sorcery we're going to be removing is Maelstrom Pulse. This is 1, a black, and a green for a sorcery, and it says destroy target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. Last I checked, we are playing EDH.
We are.
So as far as like cards go, this is a singleton format. Now, there is a deck that's playing around with Offspring, so they do have ways to be able to create tokens with the same name as a real card. You can also blow up tokens with this, but we are a token deck. If I name treasures to kill off my opponent's treasures, I'm going to blow mine up too. And I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah, the card seems good. If someone has like a lot of tokens of one, like I remember back in the day I killed a bunch of Steven stuff, but not happening all the time, so hard to rely on that. What about some enchantments? I know you added a couple. Did we remove any?
Yeah, I cut 2. I did remove Gorman's Talent. This is a single green mana. Oh, by the way, this is one of the new cards. It's a single green mana for an enchantment class. It says, during your turn, artifacts you control are foods in addition to their other types, and you can pay 2 mana, tap it, and sacrifice this artifact. You gain 3 life. I don't want to ever do that. This is a mana sink, and like I like having an abundance of artifacts, specifically like artifact tokens, because my commander can just tap them for mana. Given that she has to tap herself as well, but like we want to be able to use those. I don't want to just have to sacrifice them to just make them be foods. The second mode on this card, for 3 mana, I could level it up to level 2, and it says whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, create a 3/3 green raccoon creature token. Now, I'm not going to lie, this one actually is kind of impactful. That 3/3 is the biggest, scariest creature token that this deck can produce, which I feel like also says a lot. However, this is not really like a dedicated life gain deck. We can kind of sometimes happen to like gain life, but it's not reliable enough unless we're sacrificing things, and I don't really want to be doing that just to make a 3/3. The final mode on this card for 4 mana, if we want to level it up to level 3, says whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I do like that mode, but that's also taken us 8 mana to get to that, and once again, it's still pretty inconsistent.
Yeah. It's a cool card in theory, but I think it'd be cooler in a different deck.
And then I'm going to be removing Binding the Old Gods. This is 2, a black and a green for an enchantment saga. Whenever it enters on the first mode, it says destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls. The second mode says search your library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. And the third and final mode on this card says creatures you control gain death touch until end of turn. This is 4 mana for removal. It's single target removal, and then you get to go get a forest. I don't really care about giving my creatures Death Touch because it's going to be used offensively, and Death Touch to me is an ability that I would much rather have like defensively so that my creatures can block. So I don't know. This card is like really clunky. I don't know what was going on. There is so much removal in this list, and like this is a deck too that has several board waves. I just think like I don't know. It's just there weren't, I feel like, enough cards to actually progress your game plan. Just more so a lot of like trying to slow your opponents down.
Yeah. That makes sense, man. It looks like finally you added some lands. Did we remove any to make room for them?
I did. I'm going to be cutting 4 lands, so we are dropping the land count down. I did get rid of Golgari Rot Farm. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped, and it bounces a land back to your hand. You can tap it for both a black and a green. We have a little bit of graveyard play. That's one of the only times that I play these lands. And we have a little bit of landfall, but not enough for me to actually like genuinely care about this kind of an effect. So I am going to get rid of this. I'm also going to be getting rid of Viridescent Bog. This is a land that you can pay 1 and tap to add both a green and a black. Maybe it's just me, but this card is in my opening hand like 900% of the time, and it's like always just like my one land, and like I just can't do anything with this. It doesn't tap for mana on its own, or I will tap down my mana and I will forget that this is like my one land that is untapped, and then just sit back and realize, oh, well, I guess I'm just not interacting anymore.
Yeah. I hate filter land, and I'm very biased, I know, but whenever I have a deck that deals with filter land, my dumb brain is like, math, how I need colors, like it's, yeah, get him out of there, dude.
Yep, and then we're also going to be cutting just a basic swamp and a basic forest, dropping that land count down just by a little bit.
All right, and is that going to do it for your cuts?
That's going to do it for the cuts. That's going to do it for the ads. This is Hazel.
Well, Hazel, you were given $100 to get Hazel beefed up. What did you spend?
We spent $96, at least at the time of this recording.
Awesome. Hunter would love that because it's under budget.
It is, but it's still pretty close.
Yeah. Well, Do you have any closing thoughts on this deck and Hazel?
I do. This is the part of the video where I have maintained a lot of positivity. And don't get me wrong, I think that Hazel is a really cool and unique. No, she's cool. She's not unique. And I think that's maybe where my problem comes in with this. I really think that this is a missed opportunity. And maybe at one point in time, just looking at deck design and what's included in here, it wasn't. And maybe Hazel changed. Looking at Bloomburrow as a set, many of the squirrels care about things like foraging, which is a really cool mechanic, and that's not really seen in this deck. So I don't know. We have the makings for it. We have a lot of like sacrificing our things. We have some graveyard play, and like I do see there's a couple of food production cards as well. I just maybe wish that Hazel was more of like a forage commander. I feel like that maybe would have made her feel a little bit more unique. As a token production card, I don't actually think she's all that great. She makes a copy of a token at the end of only your turn. And if you do happen to make a copy of a squirrel, congratulations, you have 2 1/1s instead of just 1/1. I don't know. I feel like, to be completely honest, if you want to buy and play squirrels, you can still pick up this deck. And I would highly encourage you to swap the commander out and just play Chatterfang, which is actually also included in this deck. This deck, I feel like, runs really smooth with just making that swap. And in fact, if anything, I feel like it makes the deck run a lot more efficiently. Just through playthroughs, Hazel tends to not make a whole lot of squirrels.
Well, I feel you, man. Hopefully we'll see her pop off in the gameplay, though. So stick around for that, right?
Yeah, stick around for that.
Well, give David a like if you liked this video. Leave a comment letting him know maybe he missed an ad that you think he should have added. Maybe he cut something you didn't think he should cut. Drop him some comments. We like reading. We like, going through all the feedback, getting better. But while you're down there, in the description, you'll find a link to all of our social medias. So Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. It's all going to be @GuysThatMagic. On the screen right now, these are all of our Patreon members. You can also find a link to our Patreon down in the description. And if you want to see what they're seeing, which is not here on YouTube, which is also going to be the backup commander for this deck and all of the other decks, consider subscribing. And make sure you come back and check out the next upgrade coming out. And we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Later.